call the meeting to order.
Kirk, how are you?
Sorry. Special meeting of Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Board of Education. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, all three. I'm Brad Sullivan. Why don't we go around just in case everybody doesn't know everybody?
Oh, I'm Ona Nagel, Board of Finance.
Bruce Farmer, Board of Finance.
Carol Bolter, Board of Selectmen.
Lynn Hinder, Board of Selectmen.
Lori Santos, Board of Finance.
I'm Wayne Gat. Good evening, Board of Selectmen.
Mike Giordano, Board of Ed.
Emily Spaziano, Board of Ed.
Bill Williams, Board of Ed. Chad Cross, Superintendent of Schools.
Doug Tran, Board of Ed.
Debbie Hauser, Board of Ed. Mary Scatino.
Hi, how are you? Willie Fritz, First Selectman.
John Giannini, Board of Selectmen.
Dennis Donovan, Board of Finance.
Valerie Nye, Board of Finance. Leah Saunders, Board of Finance.
Thanks, everybody. All right, so we had a regular meeting in October, Board of Finance, and we went over the budget transfer report that Phil Williams had provided to the board, along with the notes and a snapshot of the transfers from the general fund. And there was a spirited discussion about how much was transferred, because when you just look at the decrease account and the increase account on the October 16th line items, you know, it looks like a pretty large number, and there was some concern, and we wanted to make sure that we eliminated any kind of issues or tension or anything like that before we go into the planning phase for the 15-16 operating budget and the CEC, the capital expenditure budget for next year. So we had a pre-meeting and we talked about 4 items that we really want to use this meeting to discuss and figure out and ask questions and make sure we're all on the same page. Those 4 items were the end of year expenditures for last fiscal year, the minimum budget requirement and how the enrollment numbers affect that, CEC appropriations request, and the cost center presentation dates and schedule, so that everybody is on the same page as far as what is going to be happening next year for the Board of Ed's requests. And obviously, you know, the overarching issue was surplus. So, I don't know how you want to work it, Phil. We can just have a free-for-all, or we can, you know, just start with the end of the year expenditures.
Start with the first item and we'll discuss that and we'll just take them in order.
Okay. End of year expenditures. So, when I just added up the decreases and look over at the increases, it looks like, Jack.
$694,000.
Yes, sir.
How much?
$694,000 and change.
Which at first blush appears to be a lot
So
more.
there, before we go any further, does everybody have a copy of this lovely document?
No.
All righty, then let's just pass them around. We are all talking from the same sheet music. So as that's going around, let me explain that at the end of the school year, we provide the board with, and it has taken different shapes this year, it looked like this. And basically it produces a
Next one, please.
a summation.
The school year was what date? You said at the end of the school year.
June 30th.
June 30th, the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah. So this document represents a combination of end-of-year balance transfers to even out line items where line items within a given cost center are over expended, but within the cost center it's not, and to address budget reductions in the 14-15 budget year. As you will recall that when we originally presented our budget, the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance reduced the initial 14-15 budget by $212,117, $103,000 from capital, and $109,117 from operations, and then proceeded to recommend that the board use the anticipated surplus to offset those reductions. After the first budget referendum, the budget was then further reduced by another $100,000. $110,000, representing $322,117 for the total budget for the 14-15 budget. So the reality is, again, the budget transfer report represents a combination of balancing of line items and ultimately the expenditure of $438,390 on items that were either in the 14-15 budget, operating budget, or capital, and or some unanticipated numbers, unanticipated costs. So what I'm passing around now is actually an analysis of the actual end-of-year purchases, which break down the expenditures in capital and in operations, breaking each one down into 3 separate categories. Under capital, it's technology, security, and unanticipated. And in operations, it breaks it down into curriculum, unanticipated, and other.
Okay.
Everybody have a copy? So under technology, you'll see that the original suggestion, recommendation of using $103,000 from the 14-15 projected operating budget. We did spend a little bit more than that based on the incremental purchasing of things, of technology items, which you see listed on the right-hand side, came up to 119. We did have some additional security upgrades and things to address from our work with security of all 4 buildings. That came up to $64,000, almost $65,000. And then there were a couple areas that we hadn't anticipated initially, and we did take advantage of the fact that we had some unanticipated surplus at the end of the year for special ed and switch upgrades at that level, so another $73,000. So all told, under what would technically be considered capital items, we spent $257,555. And then under operations, again, it's broken down by those curriculum items that were in the 14-15 budget that were reduced, there were about $136,000 there. There were a handful of items, about $40,000 worth of things that we had not anticipated, that with some new hires and some new school courses at the high school, AP Environmental Studies, for example, some additional costs as a result of our prowess on the athletic fields. We had some tournament official costs that we had not anticipated, and we also needed to upgrade some field hockey goals for Morgan that hadn't been anticipated initially. And then we also used funds from last year to pay for the pay policy audit that the board had approved earlier in the school year. The only thing that was really other, I did take advantage of $4,400, $4,500 to pay our superintendent dues for the 14-15 school year, our association with the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. So that ended up being $180,000. A total of $438,390 was actually spent out of, if you will, unanticipated surplus.
Question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is a nice explanation. What I'm trying to understand is why the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance learned of this months later. The history of Phil's committee and the rest of the committee is that when budgets are presented to the town, during the budget process, books are looked at and surpluses are accounted for. We all talk about surpluses. How did it happen that 3 weeks before, or I don't know when, between the time we voted and a few weeks later, all this money was spent, without a conversation. And as I understand it, I couldn't find any motions by your board that you did this. And I believe you're the body that has to do this. This isn't done by, line items are not done by an employee, they're done by you.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's the beginnings of my question.
Okay. Which vote were you talking about? Were you saying that 2 weeks after the vote, you...
Oh, well, the taxpayers were presented numbers, and within those numbers, requested amounts by your board for funding, and
You're talking about the referendum vote?
yes, the referendum vote. And all the taxpayers, it was publicly known that there were extra funds, a lot of extra funds. And the taxpayers, there was no clarity to the taxpayers that these extra funds were not really extra funds, they were just this is what they really were. I just don't understand why a committee would want to act without clarity and openness and to not only these people, but the town people, the people that are paying.
I don't see where we've actually done anything behind anybody's back. We have not done any transfers of money that have not been open and very clear to anybody that wants to look to see what we're doing. I mean, it's
not in any of your minutes for the fiscal year ending June 30th. These things.
We get to see the minutes.
so we don't have an actual accounting of how much money is going to be left until the books are closed on June 30th. Okay? We get people retiring at the very last minute.
This is not new news to this body. This is old news. And the history has been a discussion.
If I'm clear, I feel as though that discussion was had at a Board of Finance meeting where the first selectman stood up and requested that we spend the surplus money for anticipated projects for the following year. That wasn't voted on, and that's not in your minutes either, but that conversation did happen.
That was done at the Board of Selectmen level.
I apologize.
No, there was a portion where we said that we will reduce it with the understanding of
That's
you
correct.
will advance purchase. We've always talked about that.
So,
We've always.
I'm just speaking personally, as a member sitting on the Board of Education, I feel as though we had had that conversation, and it was clear at that point, but that was the directive given to us from Board of Finance.
Well,
And
was
Board
not
of-
a conversation
I-
on
Could you
this.
repeat
I
the
also-
figures again for what was cut from your,
322,000.
322,000? All right, and we were told in May that you were anticipating a $588,000 surplus.
That was back in February.
So
February,
with that-
which is crazy. I was at 480, you came in a little higher.
I read no finance director.
Well, yeah, we threw our best,
Well, anyway.
We were pretty close.
This is what we were told. And that, I mean, a lot of your expenses are laid out in advance. You're dealing with contracts, you're dealing with obligations. It looks to me, okay, I could understand replacing the $302,000 that you had projected as expenditures. And then, I can understand going that far as expenses after the fact. And I consider this after the fact because I'd be very curious to know exactly when these did take place. If they took place in June or whenever. So there's still an extra $100,000 here. That is $120,000 that is over and above what was cut from your budget. And we're struggling here. We're struggling. We just spent an hour with the fire department trying to figure out how to fund their pension plan, because they get nothing for all the work that they do from the town. Anything that we can put back in the general fund, in the town coffers, is good money. It goes to other resources that the town requires for public safety, etc. To me, the idea of finding that you need, I don't know. To me, it just looks as though you found a way to get rid of the excess money so that you wouldn't have to stand in front of the town again this year and say, oh yeah, well, yeah, we have budget surplus, but we still need to have a higher budget next year.
I need to say something right now. I was at the last Board of Finance meeting, and one of the major issues that was discussed was that there had been historically some procedures that had been followed, and, you know, in different people's memory, and some of those different people, you know, like Dennis and Tom Hollinger had been at, you know, been on Board of Finance before you were present. And certainly we've got a very new Board of Ed here. And I think one of the things that we wanted to have happen was to have pretty clear, come out of this meeting, is clear procedures ongoing. And I think that is really a very important thing. I don't want to have us get into an adversarial discussion between Board of Finance and Board of Ed, because I think we're all within our legal bounds on our boards and commissions. And I do in fact remember the discussion with, you know, Willie making a statement to that effect about the surplus. And I remember these things and saying it would be okay if the Board of Ed spent a certain amount of money. So I do not think we need to be into this adversarial mode now. One of the things that came up is that Dennis heretofore on capital expenditure committees was used to getting a sheet from Board of Ed about some of the capital expenditure, you know, cuts. You know,
didn't get this year.
and did not get it this year. So I think we need to come up with some clear procedures so that we all know what to expect. And we're not accusing each other of doing something that we're not doing.
I think too, just in general comments to the floor, there was a bunch of things that you all addressed, and, you know, I think Carol, you're sort of commenting on the value of the things that they purchased, and I think everybody can have personal opinions as to whether or not that those are valuable purchases or not, but I think that we need to be reminded that that's the duty of the elected Board of Ed to kind of decipher whether or not those are, you know, important for our schools. But the other thing, and Ona, you were talking about the timing of when we were presented with these transfers, and to dovetail on going forward, I guess I'm a little confused too, because the town side only just gave us our transfers literally like 10 days ago. So I don't know how we can have a higher expectation for one board and not the other, or maybe we need to at least ensure consistency of when we expect transfers to happen.
There's a difference.
What is the
This is a
difference?
significant difference.
No, tell me.
There is no surplus on the town side, there never is a surplus
But
on the
there's
town side.
transfers,
And
there's
the
5
expenditure-
pages of transfers.
And that's the difference. What we're talking about is a $434,000 number. We're not talking about $600,000 or $700,000. We're talking $322 that these boards collectively through the budget process asked the Board of Ed to reduce their budget by, okay? And then went above that. Their line item transfers to balance out the budget at the end of the year is a requirement, regardless if they have an underage in one line and an overage in another, that's what they used to do. We do the same thing. There's a difference. The town, and I don't remember it ever happening since the 9 years I've been doing this, I don't think we've ever had a surplus on the expenditure side of the budget.
If we did, how
If we
would
had a
it be
surplus,
different?
it goes into the general fund.
But how would the timing, I'm talking about timing of procedure.
Timing is before the audit.
No, there would be no additional expenditure
spending, which is
No,
without.
there is no additional expenditure.
There is
no
none.
money.
Whatever's
This is
not
just
covered
to
is there.
cover the expenses
Right.
we've already had during the fiscal year. It's
That's it.
transferring from one line to the other. Board of Ed did, part of theirs was a similar thing, same thing as what we did, but there was no additional surplus.
The Board of Ed, remember, doesn't have a revenue side. All the revenue comes to the town. The surpluses the town sees are on the revenue side of the budget. That is it. There are, and if you go to one of Tom Hollinger's points, I think it was at the joint meeting when the budget presentation went on, was the town side and the expenditure side, typically, we've been running in a deficit. Because we're appropriating money through the fiscal year towards operational line items. So the Board of Ed doesn't have that opportunity. They don't have a, first of all, they don't have a contingency fund, which is included in our budget. And God forbid, they run short on the expenditure side and have to come back to the town for money. That's only happened, I think it was 20 years ago, Tom said they had a problem with special ed where they actually had to come back. So it's not apples to apples. It's a totally different animal in that regard. We can't overexpend line items or overexpend our budget without coming back to the Selectmen and the Board of Finance and going to a town meeting depending on the budget, what the number is. Okay? The Board of Ed has the opportunity within their budget, because the towns voted to approve $30 million, round number, for them to spend. I think back to Lori's point is what we're here to talk about.
Right.
How do we go forward? What's the communication?
Right, I think the first question that was raised at the Board of Finance hearing meeting was that it's not 700,000, it was 438 with a mix of 257 for capital and 180.
It's actually a little bit more than that, because we're gonna get 40-something back. Right, was that when it came up out of Leslie's number? 43,000, that came back to general fund.
So the problem implicates a couple of other things.
Wait a
What,
minute, Could you say those numbers again? You said 400 for something?
438, 390 is the total, so
Okay.
what Jack just told us was 180, 835 for operations, 257, 555 for capital. So it implicates a couple of other things too. It talks about whether or not, we want to have a policy of urging surplus. The running total for the last 5 years, thank you, Mrs. Nye, is about 333,000. That's what you calculated last year. It might be a little different now because of this year's surplus numbers, but going on, a $333,000 5-year average, that's 1 to 2%. We interviewed a lot of business managers. Well, I was on both committees, business manager and finance director. They're all 1%, 2%, some people even said 3%, as far as the surplus goes. So are we going to start having a conversation about whether or not we should have a policy about that? And if we exceed that number or whatever that policy is, that we do something specific? That's what I'm hoping that we can all talk about, so that we can avoid this issue where, oh, they spent it. When it's operations, they get to spend it. Once the taxpayers approve it, and it goes in their operations budget, they can spend it. What we do is we try to say, let's offset that capital request that we have such a hard time funding every year with some of these requests.
Anticipated surplus.
Right.
Which has
And
been a conversation.
That's
but
where I'd like to
this
step in
policy
if I
had-
can.
Okay, go right ahead.
As chairman of the capital expenditure committee, I guess, it sort of bothers me a little bit when I see that they spent $257,555 on capital items. And I'd like to know if any of those items were on prior CEC requests, or was this all new items? For instance, I'm just throw a couple things at you. If you're saying that you spent $57,000 on computer replacement for special services, and you spend another $55,000 on computer replacement throughout the district, and you had in this year's CEC $149,450, means we spent over $250,000 on computers this year. Now, I know that when you came in and asked for the 149, when we went over the capital last year, I know that you said you had to have an increase because this exam now and everything's all gonna be done by computers, so computers had to be available to the students, and I agree with that, because we had a plan of approximately $100,000 a year, every year to spend on computers. But then, you know, you came in and was a very legit explanation that you needed 49,000 more for all these computers to get the individuals up to date. But are you telling me then on top of that, you spent another $112,000 worth of computers?
$57,000 for the special ed computers was, I mean, we had brought in last year, new technology director, we reviewed all of the requests, we made some adjustments going forward. And one of the areas that we had kind of not done well, and the analysis was that the special ed teachers needed to have the same level of equipment so that they could all run the same level of software, some of the testing software, et cetera. So,
There's 18 special ed students you're talking about?
no, these are the staff.
The staff?
This is the teaching staff. These are replacements for the teaching staff.
So this number is for computers for the teaching staff? That's what,
This 112,
No, the 57,000. So the 119 breaks down all of
Unanticipated, Carol.
the items that were ultimately in last year's capital, or this year's, technically this year's capital. So the 119 represents numbers that we actually reduced, 103,000. We did end up spending a little bit more than the 103 that was reduced on those items that were on the 14-15 capital for technology. And, you know, I didn't bring all of that information tonight, we're doing summary pieces, but we can certainly break that out for CEC, so you can see, you know, what we did.
You're giving an explanation, Jack, and I understand, and it's good. So you spent it,
Yeah.
right? Okay. I mean, that's the bottom
But
line.
I think
You
that to
spent
answer your
it.
question is that the 119 was in, those are all items that were in our original 14-15 capital budget.
What were?
The list of things in
The
the,
technology stuff.
under technology column, the 119, those were
All
all,
those were originally in?
yes.
So you won't see those amounts
Correct.
in your 15, 16.
That's the $500 question, Dennis.
Right.
Were they part of the 10-year plan, 5-year plan for this year, next year, and beyond?
Right.
Is that coming off of that list? Okay?
That's exactly what I'm trying to
Right,
get.
that's what you're getting.
Is the fact is that I don't like to say these words because, you know, the people, it's a lousy way to say it, but this wasn't just a wish list that was devised for this year. There were actually some things that are on future CECs, were on CEC. Why is she giving me a face like that?
So,
You don't think that's a legitimate question?
so,
I think it's a very legitimate question when you come in $257,000, right?
Dennis, so once again, the list under the technology that represents $119,000 are all items that were on the original 14-15 capital item under that 140.
Under the
It's not gonna come off of
149,450.
It's not gonna come off of future
Okay.
CECs because it was here.
So those items were all on the 14-15 capital.
On the 149,450,
Right.
okay.
And we reduced that, remember, by 103, and we did end up spending
But
a little bit more.
you never told us where you reduced that by the 103. That, again, is for future reference.
Okay?
It'd be nice to let us know, we did reduce, or the town, or we all decided to reduce after the, to reduce your CEC from your original request in system-wise of 408,450 down to 305,450.
We
But
did
we
it-
never got an idea of where.
You didn't get a line, or
Right.
an itemized issue.
So you're saying most of it came out of,
All of it came out of technology.
okay, see, you could have made it life easier if we sent that.
Dennis, we did end up saying, at the time of this whole process, that because originally, Willie's suggestion was slightly different in terms of what we could do with it. And we said we would take all 103 out of technology at the time.
I came up with a scenario with several options under capital, And then the other one I threw, which was in their operating, was the textbooks, was 119,000 or whatever.
Textbooks.
Buy them now, you know what you need, buy them now and cover the money. And then the capital, obviously, Jack's gotta figure out what he can get spent or encumbered and get contracts with people before June 30th.
I thought the discussion, remember the recommendations of our advisors to have recommended savings, having one technology person for the town and the schools and one financial director. That's what, when we reduced the 103,000, that's what we were talking about. That's what I remember Val saying.
Can't tell them
Oh,
what
that
to
was
take.
two, that was two, that was the, that wasn't the 103, that was the additional like 110.
After the
That was
budget
different.
failed.
After the budget failed.
Yeah,
That was, yeah.
You can't
So-
direct them where to take it, other than,
yeah, that, we just use that as a benchmark as to the dollar that we would reduce it by.
So the
There is a general feeling that the town and the Board of Education should work together to decide where those cuts are made. Granted, we can't tell them anything, but when we are advised by our financial people that we are best served by having a unified position for the finance director and the business manager, and we throw that recommendation out to the tune of, you know.
I hate to say it, we crossed that bridge 2 or 3
Yeah,
times
I
during that
know,
whole
but
process, and we came up on the same side of the bridge both times,
But
each time, so that's why we are where we
This is why the budget
are.
goes up and up and up, if we don't listen to the advice.
They
we are
weren't
fine
telling
and
us, they weren't advising us based on finances. They were advising us based on what they felt was an efficiency of operation.
And
Nothing to
clarity.
do with dollars and
And
cents.
clarity.
It all has to.
They don't know what dollars and cents it takes to run our town.
It all
They
has
know what the numbers come in at the end of the year and where they're supposed to
to.
be.
You forget that it's about dollars. that
If
we
that
do
was
to
the case,
service
then we
the
might as
town.
well just hire them to run the town. And we can all go home and sit home and get ready to watch the football game in about an hour.
Are you talking about Bloom Shapiro?
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
They're just,
Yes, their recommendations.
Well, I mean, they're
Auditors
auditors.
They're auditors.
I mean,
makes it easier, we don't have to deal with one person.
So
Well,
then,
This is not what you were saying a year ago at this time.
We all sat together how many times? Come on.
This
let's
is not what you were saying a year ago.
We are where we are, we can't go back. It doesn't matter, we're not going backwards, we're here to go forward
The
tonight.
point is that we are to work together.
We are,
To-
that's what we're trying to do
create the most
tonight, that's what we're trying to do.
efficient
But if we
system
keep bringing up
we
the
can.
stuff that you guys are upset
Why don't you
about,
let me finish
we gotta go
talking?
forward.
Why don't you let me
Because
finish
you
talking?
can't
And
even
then I'll
remember numbers that are on
say-
paper in front of you.
Carol,
Why don't you let you
it's
finish
your
talking?
tone, it's your tone.
Mine.
And it's really accusatory,
Mr. Dunn,
and
Yes,
it's
go
not
ahead.
productive.
so if, as a step for us going forward,
You deserve it.
in the circumstance that the capital is reduced, or in the event that, God forbid, should we have a surplus going forward,
Please don't do that.
Yeah.
that we,
Talk about that attitude.
and we're going to address capital, that we would, in fact, provide you with a list of those things that we're going to take out of that, the approved capital for that year.
That'll make life a lot easier,
Going
Jack.
forward.
That's a good policy. And that's exactly what Brad was talking about before. That's a good step, basically.
Dennis, what is the policy with other boards that are spending money on capital when they write those checks and those purchase orders?
Quite frankly,
There are no other boards. That's it.
the other boards in town, they spend every dime that they have in capital for
No, what I'm saying is
whatever itemized item that they have.
If you give another board or department $100,000 for capital expenditures.
Right.
When they go and issue those purchase orders for
Right.
those items, where's the notification process? What is the standard operating procedure?
Goes to the board.
Do you get notified of it?
No, we don't have to.
Here's what
At
happened.
the end of the year, she tells us that, or he or she at the time, the finance director tells us and says, Park Rec spent all their money on all the things that you itemized
And it can
per
only
those
spend on
items.
those
If there's any surplus in any one of those items, it goes into the general fund.
Right.
it's a bumpy landing this year because where you have the superintendent and the first selectman acting as finance director / business manager. So I think that we had a little bit of a bumpy landing as far as the reporting goes. And also, you know, up until this year, you know, we'd always been able to just go talk to the finance director at our regular meetings, and we knew what was going on with the Board of Ed funds. You know, we knew what was happening with the capital fund. But the Board of Ed is under the same requirements that the other boards and commissions and departments in town are under. Is if you're not gonna expend a capital fund within 2 years, then you have to put it in writing and request an extension. Right, yeah, you did. I mean, and literally, I mean, I think it sounds to me from so far in the meeting is that we have, you know, maybe it was inartfully communicated, you know, the spreadsheet that I got, so we can fix that, because this is much better, the backup. So I mean, we just need to make sure we're keeping in touch as far as through the spring goes with your estimated surplus number, which I know is a moving target, but we deal with that face-to-face with the public at the hearings. So I mean, we have to make sure that if somebody were to think that the surplus that was spent was $700,000, we need to disabuse them of that notion immediately.
Again, I think the unfortunate part of this at this early stage was that the budget transfer report was presented without one of us to begin with, and that this backup wasn't available at that time to put some context to it. Yes. So, I mean, I think that, you know, the one of the other pieces that I would entertain, I think would probably be beneficial, is that, you know, when there are agenda items, whether they are included officially or otherwise, where you may have desire to have some explanation from the Board of Ed, we're happy to come. You know, again, we don't get to every single Board of Finance meeting or every single Board of Selectmen meeting, but we're happy to come to explain anything at any point. And likewise, we invite you to come to any and all of our meetings so that some of these things aren't out of context.
We meet on the
So
same
Jack, are
days.
you saying that this sheet is wrong?
No, it's a summary of transfers, it's not a summary of the expenditures. This is the summary of the end of year expenditures in terms of what we used, quote unquote, anticipated surplus.
See, the total transfers
This
equals
is for the
$694,000.
whole of the process.
Well, if there's one item that doesn't appear anywhere, and maybe you can explain that one to me.
This is, because we are part of the, what's it called, consortium, the medical consortium. This is, came out of our regular funding source for the dental and prescription funding. So it wasn't transferred, it was just that's a payment to this.
But it came out of the same employee medical account.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doug, can you read what you're holding there so we all know what
Yeah,
you're referring to, please?
I'm holding a memo regarding prescription and dental self-insurance, and the memo is from Jack to Vivian Kennedy, and they said, please transfer $150,000 from the employee medical account 08-200-51001, which is the account that shows up here for the time, to the district's dental and prescription Eastern Connecticut Health and Medical Cooperative to offset premium rate increase, which I assume is for the following year, the next fiscal year. So we're paying the 150 into the 14-15 fiscal year, right?
To that account, yeah.
To that account. But that 150 shows up nowhere.
Well, again, technically, it's not a transfer of funds, it is a payment to them. So this only represents transfers from.
But it was money sitting in that account.
Yeah.
The same account that we're showing 189,000 came out of, 83, and this is another 150,000.
But it's not a transfer from a different account to another account.
But it's gone out of our account.
It's a payment
It's a
for
payment.
coverage.
Payment for an invoice.
Okay, what I had asked for was the invoice.
Isn't it gonna be great when there's a business manager?
So
Answer
what?
all these questions. When there's a business manager, all
Always
these
next
questions
we
will
have
be answered.
problems, please.
All right, so I think we've beaten the hell out of the expenditure, end of year expenditures stuff. Anybody have any other last comments or questions about it? Please.
Is it reasonable to ask them for an informal update every 2 or 3 months, so there are no surprises?
I would,
Go ahead.
I would like to suggest what Shipman and Goodman, who are experts in education law, has suggested to sync with the General Assembly new law about expenditures and the scrutiny, excuse me, if I can, the scrutiny between this body and your body, and they say point blank that your body should give our bodies written explanation of transfers. This was, this law that was passed,
That was effective October 1,
not
2013.
2013. So I know that you remind me that there's some people suing about this law, but it is our law. So I would respectfully request that things be put in writing.
Does it say anything about?
Guys, there's a Board of Ed that's responsible for the operating budget that is given to them every year. So, I mean, we don't need to double the oversight.
No, but at
Brad,
the
I
end of
would
the year.
remind you that they are 67% of our
Yeah.
entire budget.
And there's an elected Board of Ed,
So we should
Bruce.
be getting reports on a timely basis according to the law.
But it doesn't say how frequently.
No, that would be,
In the event of.
They meet twice a month. They approve the bills that get spent.
And
I mean, it's like there's a Board of Ed, they're elected, they're in charge of their budget. It's like,
Basically, you'll
it's
get
like
a-
asking the
you-
commission, police commission to come in, or the
you'll
fire
have to,
department.
they send you a letter saying what the transfers are. You can like it or not, it's not gonna change anything.
Please go.
It's
right now,
extra work.
we're talking about the end of the year. That's what we're talking about.
No, I know. This
I'm
one-
not
that's the
asking
bigger-
that every
that's-
time they buy an umbrella.
That's right, exactly.
And that statute is impositive. It doesn't apply to this matter.
Yeah, but isn't it a reasonable expectation at the end of the year we get
Yes,
something
it
in
is a
writing?
reasonable
And-
expectation.
At the
It's
end of
not.
the year,
Yeah, that's
That's
why
what
this is all
Brad just
fuzzy.
said.
I think we've agreed that it's reasonable.
No, but writing, yeah. Just a suggestion.
All right,
Oh, no, are you making reference just to capital expenditures?
I'm talking about, once a number is given to the electorate, our taxpayers, about monies, surplus monies, what they think of as, well, different people think of different things. They think it's money coming back to the town, they think part of it's gonna go into your capital and you will improve things. Whatever it is, that it's clear to everyone that it's not really there, that it's being spent on something at the end of the year. And this is this, but not in the middle of November.
Okay.
MBR and the enrollment, Jack, you want to do the 5 minutes on that? See if there's any questions from the boards?
Did we deal with the policy and procedures yet?
No, I mean, I think the policies and procedure stuff, we're gonna handle on the Board of Finance side, because that document needs to be reviewed with Janet, and that committee needs to reform. I mean, does not on the Board of Finance. Arthur used to be on it, you were on it.
Yeah.
And we just have to kind of revamp everything, I mean, because it's outdated now already. Our accounting policies and procedures.
That's
It's gonna be outdated every 3 months.
Janet's next
I
time.
mean, look, I'd love to see a policy in there where we talk about whether or not the town, from a fiscal perspective, is, wants to budget really close to zero, and force the Board of Ed, to walk on eggshells and come back. And if we don't have a sufficient contingency, and we're near the floor on our undesignated fund, we run into a problem. That's a fact. I mean, we've cut our contingency to 100,000.
Brad, is it the expectation that there will be Board of Ed representation on that committee that works on?
Accounting policies and procedures.
Be the business manager.
I mean, we probably would talk
Work
with
with
Janet and the
business
business manager, superintendent, maybe somebody from your board, and we can definitely
I
have
think it would be nice
all-inclusive.
just to have that representation there so that,
Yeah, it makes
you know,
sense.
so we know how it plays out realistically in a systematic way,
There's,
so.
I'm hoping, and I really hope when the business manager gets in place, that she and I, or he and I think it's a she, have a lot of communication going back and forth.
Yeah.
And I think that hopefully will alleviate
Right.
maybe some of the issues.
brave new
Great.
world.
Gotta finish with the police 75th thing first. Let's get that cleaned up. All right.
So I'm certain that everybody at this table probably all have a different way to explain minimum budget requirement and how enrollment affects minimum budget requirement.
I'll try to do the clear and concise version. Minimum budget requirement is based on the approved, the previous year's approved appropriated final budget for the Board of Ed. And the number of resident students that the Board of Ed is responsible for. Now, resident students means the students that are actually enrolled in our 4 schools, and in addition, any student who is either outplaced or otherwise in another school where we are paying or are responsible in some way for a portion of that tuition. So the vocational agricultural schools, magnet schools for which we are not in a pact with from when they were originally conceived, but even then, there are kids that are in magnets that technically are ours, so they count at the present time. But so it's all the students who are here on premises in our 4 schools, plus any student that we're ultimately responsible for in terms of providing some subsidy, some count for their education, some funding for their education.
At the end of the year.
It's actually done on October 1st of every year.
What is
And-
it? What is it? What is that number? That
Well, the number for
that
this,
you're responsible for?
upcoming year hasn't been established yet. The 14-15 number was based on, if I have it right here, I think I have it correct, because it's always based on the year previous. So the 2014 MBR is 30,498,444, 441.
Based on how many students? Or that's
Based on the number of students from the previous year, October 1 of 2016.25.
not, October 1st, 2014, the number was
No,
2000.
it's the,
October 1st, 2013.
2016 kids.
right, so they're always a year backwards, and I have the 12, I have 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13. Yeah, but that's for the No, 14, 15 isn't published yet, but we did get that number from the state, and they haven't determined 15, 16 MBR yet. 15, 16's MBR won't be, out really until sometime after the first of the year, when they finish their reporting from previous year's enrollments.
But what is the number of students? That's what, you gave me the $30 million number.
Right, and so I.
2016.
Oh, 2016. I thought that was the year, sorry.
0.25.
Thank you.
But.
How do you record a student?
What's that? Because they calculate preschool kids as only half-time, and some kindergarten programs are only half-time. And so they count them as, because it's really
Preschool kids
FTEs.
are on it still, huh?
Preschool, if they go to a magnet school. Kindergarten, I'll have to double check preschool. I know kindergarten is part of the reason that they do that, but there is a question about preschool in magnet schools that are going to magnets. So I'll have to double check on the magnet, on the pre-K magnet.
And that's a legislative action too. The minimum budget number is set by a legislative act.
But it doesn't matter, the state law now says whatever you approved last year, whichever's greater. So we're at 32 million, they're saying we should be at 30 million for the minimum budget. So 32 million is the number we have to deal with the next year.
Probably.
That's
No,
state law.
it will likely, I mean, the reality is that the 15-16 minimum budget will be the approved number that we have, that we appropriated for 14-15, minus the reduction in total resident students by $3,000 per student up to a cap.
What's it, Karen?
The total number, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't remember how many, because there is a max that they can reduce.
That would be if we went with the MBR. If the MBR ruled the budget.
Correct.
Okay. Questions about MBR?
I think the other part is that is important to recall or remember is that when the state sets the MBR early in the school year or early in the next calendar year, they will have calculated in the reduction, the student reduction. So they'll have done those calculations, taken their $3,000 per students out, and that will be that would be that number that we can't technically go below.
And if you go below it,
There are penalties that go forward in terms of whether or not you repay that difference in the following year, or then if you don't, then there are other consequences. And again, it escalates in terms of finances.
question?
In your physical count, October 1st, what did you, what's it, 1,970 kids or
I'm
something?
sorry, I didn't hear the first part of the question, I'm sorry, Carol.
Your actual count, just out of curiosity, for October 1st of this year, my understanding is like 1970,
1,900.
1900,
Yep.
down 116?
No, Carol, that's
From
in the budget.
2013, I know, from 2013, October 1st, no?
That's in the building, you've got to count the people.
That's
that
not the
get
resident, that's not the
not
resident
the ones that go to
students,
Magnus.
that's just our enrollment.
Oh, okay, that does not include the BOAG and the, okay. So what, do you have a number for
I
that?
don't have that off the top of my head. One of the difficulties is that the way the state calculates resident students and what I think is the way that they're calculating it, our numbers never quite come together. So that's why there is a question for me about the pre-K.
Well, I know in the projections for the new school, there's an algorithm that's used. Is that how they do this, or do they do this as a physical?
No, their enrollment numbers for purposes of MBR are based on actuals.
Okay.
So these are our current work on enrollment projections based on the Prada 2012, Peter Prada analysis and the 2013 DRA analysis of our numbers, accounting for, and what you will see is different if you look at when the final DRA report is out. Their projections are actually a little higher than ours at this point because of our current enrollments. So we've adjusted the anticipated based on current enrollments going forward based on a 3-year weighted average.
Just, how many people in last year's actual number of students, resident students at the end of the year, how many were outplaced that wouldn't be in the schools?
Last year we had 217, no, that's not true, sorry. 217 total special ed students. There were 17, 18 students that were placed out as a result of special education.
Okay.
And as I remember, that number looked like it was gonna go down because about 5 or 6 of them were reaching age of 22 this year. So they would be off.
So they're aging out.
Yeah, there was a lot of 1992 births, I think.
There were some.
And that includes the vocational agriculture?
No, that does not, that's only the special ed population, the identified special ed population. So I don't have a total number for you at this point for BOAG and magnets and such.
Any other questions or comments on MBR and the enrollment?
I would like to make one comment, because I found it quite interesting on the Board of Education. Recently, Jack's been talking about an ever-growing influx of children and families coming from around the world, who oftentimes don't have language. English certainly is not their first language, and some of them really have had very little exposure to school, and certainly no preschool. And so I think that it is of note to all of us that there's this increasing group of young, of kids going to be entering our schools, coming from families who are most likely highly disadvantaged. And I'm not sure what the implications of that are, but I think we all should be aware of that as we think about the
Do
future.
you, my guess is that Clinton is not unique in that.
I'm sure they're not migrating
School
to-
systems have to be dealing
Yeah,
with
they're
that
not going
issue
to
as well.
Madison.
Do you have
They're not going to say,
any consultation with
Yeah.
those school
Guilford.
systems as to what they're?
Yeah, the only, right now, the only other district that is having similar experience and on a smaller scale is Westbrook. Madison and Guilford are not experiencing the same.
It's too expensive there.
HK is not experiencing the same.
Is there any thought of regionalizing?
Yes, there is, that's a great idea.
Brilliant.
Right, careful.
We always say that, it's great.
Well, I mean,
Gotta
it
get somebody to come to the
clearly
Walter
only
with
makes sense.
So what are you thinking of, how does regionalization sort of help? Because we're gonna pull resources?
Well, we have to help those
So,
students to get
we've
concentrated.
entered into conversation
Oh,
with
sorry.
with the Regional Education Service Center, and I've had conversations with Westbrook, and even though Madison and Guilford aren't particularly experiencing that issue at this point, one of the main topics for conversation is for those students who are really coming, particularly at the middle school and high school, with no English language background, and how do we best get them prepared so they can access the regular education. So we met last week with the building administrator for the dual language program in Learn, at Learn, Magnet School. And we've met regionally as superintendents to talk about how we can do that. We have an immediate problem that we're dealing with right now in terms of, we have 10 kids that are basically non-English speakers that we're working with at the high school level alone. So as this progresses, we are, and both Westbrook and the other superintendents are very interested in what we end up developing, and we're using Learn as our council of resource as well to develop a program. So, yes, sir.
So this puts an extra burden on some of you teachers, obviously, so you probably have to
Yeah,
adjust your
it's
staff
mainstream.
accordingly, right?
The
Language.
Yeah, what we actually, it's very, we do have English, we have had from before I got here, two English language learner teachers, English language learner ESL teachers. One that works for us with the students in K through 5, and one that works 6 through 8. And when we first got here, it was manageable with the 2 people. Since then, the numbers have grown to the point where their caseloads are between 35 and 45, each. So we've had to readjust and really look at the program differently. So we do have a tutor at the elementary level that works with our kindergarten and first grade students, and we have a para that will be helping the ELL teacher at the high school. She is not bilingual, but she does speak Spanish, so that will help us. And then, we're looking to do this
Is this only Spanish-speaking people? or-
No,
there are other
no, but that's, the
dominations.
bulk of the population is Hispanic, but there are, I think there are
You said 17.
17 or 18 different languages, yeah, we have right now that we're dealing with.
This is why I would encourage everybody to come to our cost center presentations for our budgets, because these are the kinds of issues with which we're grappling. That it's not as simple as number of students, number of teachers, this many buildings, that there are so many complicated issues that our principals, our administrators are presenting to us, that we're trying to meet the needs of all of our students and do the right thing. It's just, as the town is complicated, education is complicated, and the administrators really outline all of these issues and the reasons why they're asking for the monies that they're asking for, to help us to make informed choices with the budget, so.
Which brings us to December 16th and December 18th. Starting at 6 o'clock.
That's when they start?
Those are the cost center.
Those 2 dates, the 16th and the 18th?
Yeah.
Something's going on.
And I would just like to add, if I may, to belabor the point a bit further, is that, you know, obviously doing the right thing by these kids and their families who are coming in at gross disadvantages is important and ethical. But the other thing is that it really will affect our long-term academic outcomes in terms of aggregate, in terms of CAP testing or things like that. So I think that, Clinton, I think, has been, the school system has been under-recognized and underappreciated statewide, and I think that the problem will continue to be with us if we don't really help the kids who are coming in at such a disadvantage and bringing them up to speed. So I think that, again, is an added burden or a privilege for the Board of Ed and for the teachers and administrators. So it's a daunting problem, and I think Jack and his team has done a really good job about approaching it. And this is not a problem that's going to be going away, so that's not for me.
We need some left-handers.
I just want to go back to your original statement. We're supposed to be moving forward and develop some policies for smoother operation.
Well, I mean,
What have we accomplished so far
I think
tonight? Any other suggestions besides that we're going to get itemized cuts to the CEC?
Right.
I think Phil and I were discussing something the other day, remember Phil? Concerning CEC. And I think Jack, I hope you've had time to talk to Phil, because I know you and I have talked also about certain things maybe shouldn't be in CEC. They should be operational items, and I would say one of those things, I think, Jack, we were talking about was painting. You know, they have to account to us for painting in CEC. That is an R&M thing that they do on a continual basis, year after year. That should be in their operational budget. That should be something that they have to come in and request. Even though it's over $7,500, I think I said, and I hope I'm not wrong, when I say there's other departments that do R&M items above $7,500 and they're not in CEC, correct?
Agreed.
Oh, good. So I see items like that being taken out, and I was hoping maybe you had some more, Phil, that you thought should be taken out of CEC and put more in the Board of Ed's operational.
If you remember last year in the budget process, even the town side, we did it with the town hall, with the renovations, that once we completed it, we put stuff that we used to typically go to CEC for requests every year.
You have a $30,000 line item.
The auditorium floor, that should be sanded and sealed almost every year after all the events, that's in the operational budget now. The power washing in the front of the building, those things used to be capital requests every so many years, those are in operation, they should be in your operation, as part of our so.
Right.
There you go.
What you need to have.
In order to upkeep the stuff, you have to have it in there, because if you put it out for a whim into capital and it gets whacked,
There you go.
there goes another year slides by, and then it's gonna cost more.
Musical instruments is on in the CEC budget, which makes no sense to me.
My record player.
So I guess to kind of put a finer point on this is that we are up for presenting our CEC on the 13th.
Thursday.
And I think either A, some guidance at this early stage with the idea that, with a recognition that if we are pulling some of these items that we would normally have put into a CEC budget out to embed in the operations budget, that there is a mechanism for recognizing that transfer, number one. And number two, that there's, again, guidance or direction relative to items that are in that system, because I think that's where they would likely come from.
Right, usually are in system.
Well, Pearson, you gotta refinish gym floor, 16,000, and you have it Board of Ed priority moved to 16, 17, so it's not even gonna be in your Thursday request, but I mean, it's a maintenance item. Painting walls, maintenance item.
Well, again, I think that, that this is where, in terms of the overall guidance relative to that is,
We're pushing sand from one spot to one spot to one spot. I mean, it's
you
really about
have 4
accounting.
buildings, in theory, every 4 years you're doing one of the gym floors. In theory, so to have a line item in your budget.
You're system-wide, you know,
It
and
would be
our
helpful if the
system-wide.
CEC would put out a set of, this is what you consider for CEC, and the rest of it is you put off as maintenance.
Well, you're sitting with the group.
That's
CEC's an ad
why
hoc
we're here,
committee.
that's what we're talking about, Phil.
Right. I understand we're sitting with the group. All I'm asking for is to see it in writing, so then it will be in
Perpetuity.
But CEC,
So that the
It's
next.
on video, go on YouTube.
always remember one thing, Phil, CEC is an adjunct committee, ad hoc, to the Board of Selectmen, just to help them with.
The guidance you're seeking is accounting policies and procedures.
We
put it in
can't
that
draw up
document.
policies and procedures, they do, the Board of Finance, they have to
Well, you're that.
incorporate. Well, I am too, but
That's a lot of hats.
so the only question, and Brad, you and I have had this conversation, is that we're in the early stages of this process. So if we're gonna change the rules, which is fine, I mean, and I'm in agreement that there are certainly items here that,
We call them guidelines.
but
right.
do you want me to generate those guidelines? Or are we gonna have somebody else?
Well, yeah, I'd like to have some more input from your side,
In your
because you
budget
deal
book,
with
in
it.
your budget book, when you show your system-wide maintenance, you have a little asterisk that says, this includes blah, 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 that based on discussion, you pull out of capital.
Not to bore other people.
And then it goes away the next year.
Run down real quick, I mean, I can run right down and say, maintenance equipment replacement, right there, maintenance equipment. That's R&M.
Well, the difficulty is that if you're talking about.
He's only asking for 10,000.
No, Dennis, you can't say it just as a carte blanche statement like that, because equipment could be,
Condensing or whatever.
it could be a truck that they have to have
Well,
for the maintenance department, so.
well, I wouldn't call that your average equipment.
But I think that's.
Okay, you're right, you're right.
He's thinking
We'll get
it's like
specific.
mop heads and stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking of mop
Yeah,
heads,
the mop heads are
buffers.
here. The things that are here are buffers, and that level.
No show.
No, snow shovels are in operation.
Right, snow shovel, gloves, stuff like that, and
But those aren't here.
once we get the trucks filled, you really get to talking. Go ahead, Jack.
Well, I'm happy to
I'm gonna miss Thursday.
bring some recommendations on the 13th
Agreed.
from our side to say, here are things that we think make sense. If we can agree on that point, fine, otherwise, we may be waiting a year until we make those decisions. But if we can come to grips with that and then communicate that.
I don't
to
see
the
why we
boards,
shouldn't come to
that's
grips. It's like Willie says, we're always waiting a year, we procrastinate a year, let's do
All the
things.
money we're saving with
Let's
the solar
change.
stuff,
Let's change. And we're open, I mean, really.
Dennis is getting a lot more liberal when it comes.
13th.
These are the guys, you guys are too toughies.
You're softening up, man, you're softening.
So December 16th and 18th are your cost center, those are at the Board of Ed at 7 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Start at 6.
I have a question. In the past, and I don't know if you didn't do this year, or you've had, like an open meeting.
We're not doing a forum this year.
The forum.
We're gonna be, we're doing we're taking other tacks to reach out to other organized groups to have some conversation about budget. So we will be meeting, for example, with PTA in January. There's been some discussion about meeting with both the RTC and ETC to have some conversation about budget. If they would like to have a separate room, I'd be fine.
Have it at the country club open bar. Pleasant.
Those are we're just looking for other ways because the traditional things that we've done up to this point have not been terribly effective.
If that's in January, is that after your budget is almost in place? I
They
mean,
come
it
to
was-
us in February.
Their
Yeah,
presentations.
that's what we're-
And we'll have, once we have, where we get to a point, we'll have communications out to the group so they can give us some feedback at
Yeah,
that point.
okay.
In your budget calendar, when are you going to finalize your operating budget? Tentatively, is it the January, the second meeting?
Second meeting in January. And I don't have it off the top of my head.
Sorry.
You know, just for future reference, when you hand out the packets for your budget at the Board of Ed, presentation, is it possible to get those a day or two in advance so that we can?
Carol, I, first of all, except for 1 year since I've been here, we've done it in advance. 1 year, I did not hand them out in advance. Every other year, they've been distributed to the town hall several days in advance, and in most cases, a week in advance. So there was 1 year, and I,
Well, how come we don't get them? I never get them till that night.
As soon as I get them from him, you get the email saying they're here.
And they're in our files.
Yep, so it's up to you whether you come immediately and pick it up or not, but the minute I get them, you know.
Thank you.
But
We just scan them?
Except for those damn agendas.
they're physically sent to us.
We sent them out so early, that's the problem. You forget about them.
I absolutely agree, we should have them in advance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes it
If
clearer
he sends it, yeah.
to you in advance.
So we'll definitely, gonna take a look, we'll get with Janet and we'll take a look at the accounting policies and procedures and we'll keep you guys in the loop about that. We'll do something as far as the capital expenditures, as far as the policy goes, to try to provide some guidance. We'll hopefully, sometime in summer, we'll get a list, or even we can talk about the items that are on your capital list. Because if I look at the list now that you're gonna present on Thursday, if you do end up having another operating surplus, we would be looking for items from that list to be offset for next year. I don't think that's changed. As far as Ona's issue about that statute, where they have to talk to the town in writing about moving money, I think it's from a capital account into an operating or building maintenance account or something like that, I think is the word from the statute.
It's just a school board expenditures.
Yeah, the language of the statute references educational expenses.
There are two parts of that.
Non-education.
One has.
Non-educational.
One has to do with.
Non-educational expenses, thank you.
One has to do with capital, which has never been an issue. We've never tried to, use capital for operating. And the second piece is the written communication that has to do with emergency.
No, not exactly.
That's what the statutory language
But
says.
I have
I
an
get it.
interpretation of this.
Yeah, I
Do you
get
have
it.
the statute owner or just the law tribute? Which is
I have the
like
statute.
required
Here's the
of the
statute
law?
right here.
It's a letter that
Shipment Equipment interpreted the statute. I mean, there were four.
But it does say
Forms.
emergency circumstances in this.
It says,
it's 10-222, I think, right?
Correct.
It is.
So, we've had preliminary discussions about whether or not we should get a legal opinion.
Did Kevin come in on anything?
I've had the conversation with Kevin, and the issue is that they will probably want to have Abe and he do something together so that it's not perceived as
Board of Ed attorney.
Board of Ed's attorney versus somebody else.
So they work together.
Yeah.
Okay. Because then that would provide us some guidance to ensure that we're not running afoul of the state law. So Board of Ed can take care of that?
Well, I'll follow up with Kevin and have he engage to propose something to to us.
Okay. All right, cool. Any other questions, issues?
Hey, while we're here,
Yes, sir.
well, while we're here,
While we're here.
because I mentioned it when Jack and Phil were in that, and I said, you know, another elephant in the room is the maintenance facility. Maybe doesn't know the history of the Board of Ed maintenance facility. When we were going through the process for the New Morgan project, because it was not subject to reimbursement by the state of Connecticut as part of the project, the decision was made to pull it out of the project as a cost-saving measure. First of all, because if it's part of the project, it wouldn't be reimbursed. Secondly, if it's part of the project, it's also subject to prevailing rate, which can add 25 to 30%. And the feeling was that we could find another location somewhere, whether it's on a town property, school property, whatever, build it. It would be under the $400,000 threshold that triggers prevailing rate, and therefore, we go forward that way. So it's been bouncing around for a while, and we're getting to a point now with the building committee, there's a subcommittee, I think Mike and Phil are on the subcommittee with John and Dennis. Is anybody else on that, or just the four of you?
Just the four on the subcommittee.
So there's been, and I don't want to speak for you guys, I don't know if one of you guys want to jump in, or just let me be the shield.
I'll stop you if you're going on.
All right.
Well, just a point of order, do you want to make a motion as a Board of Finance to add this to the agenda, so it's officially part of the agenda?
It's a discussion item, it's not going to be, there's no
Discussion regarding
decisions,
policy
there's
for
no.
capital operating budget. Yeah, it could come under number 3, Jack.
Okay.
Okay.
So, here's where it's at. The committee has looked at town properties, and in particular, public works. The focus has been on public works as a town property. They've looked at school properties, focus on a piece of the Joel property, which is adjacent to the annex, and the basketball courts over there. And subsequent to a meeting with Phil, Jack, myself, and John looked at a piece adjacent to the field hockey field at the annex and the parking lot over there by the dog park. So there's an impasse as to, I mean, obviously, the Board of Ed, the administration would like to have it on school property. I don't care where it goes, I just want it to be the most effective place for the town. Financially, we owe that to the taxpayers. I think the building committee, other than probably Phil and Mike, feel that it should be down at DPW. I'm throwing it out there because it's gonna come back to both of these groups, the Selectmen and the Board of Finance, in the next few weeks, somehow, some way, to make a decision to move this thing forward. It has to go to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, are gonna have to go to a town meeting because there's gonna be appropriation involved. I think you need to have an idea where everybody's coming from on this, between the Board of Ed, the Building Committee, the town, because we gotta get going on this thing. The school's being built, they're pouring concrete every day, this thing is going like guns. And in September 2016, or actually sometime in summer 2016, we gotta have a place for these guys to go.
What was the result of the committee that looked into this?
I'll let the committee members speak, because
What did they suggest?
Well, I'm the chair of that. Board of Ed had I don't know, they had someone do up some kind of, I don't know what you call it, but basically something that says where the best place would be. And that came back and it showed on the school property, but it really was kind of.
Well, just to be fair, we had, as part of our facility study, that we looked at Joel, Elliott, and Pearson as a comprehensive study of what kinds of long-range issues may be necessary, and part of it had to do with the declining enrollment and whether it was going to be productive to look at reconfiguring any of those 3 buildings or any combination of. As part of that was, again, an independent study looking at the facilities in general and looking at where the best location or a suitable location for the maintenance facility to be. So it wasn't, it was done in conjunction
Yeah,
with the
conjunction,
independent
so
study.
Mike.
Right.
But it said, I thought it was a little bit swayed towards, the Board of Ed asked for it, or I don't know who asked for it, maybe just Jack did, I don't understand, but it showed something about safety and stuff like that. I don't know if you guys understand where the proposed spot was at Joel. It would be like kind of near the basketball court I don't know if you go there, but where the kids get picked up all the time, right around there. So, I don't know if you guys know Butch, but he does a lot of work for the town. I think you guys all know that I'm a builder, developer guy, whatever. So Butch and I volunteered to do some cost analysis on the two different sites. And at the least, in my opinion, and it's professional opinion, it would be, maybe I think we came up about $50,000 cheaper at DPW. That's at the least if we compared apples with apples. I truly don't think in the spot right next to where it was proposed at that time, Joel is a very good spot, safety-wise, just a lot of different reasons why there. Then at the last meeting, when the four of us were together, there was a spot at the end of the field hockey field, or whatever you want to call it, there's a parking lot there, but no one's really come forward to give me any more site plan on that. I asked for a site plan. You know, we don't know where exactly septic systems are, we don't know where power is, we don't know water, we don't know anything there. Another problem, and Dennis has made this clear, is not that it's all Clinton property or whatever, but you do have the park and rec property come through, that they want to be addressed and at least brought into the equation if we're going to go through their property, correct, Dennis?
It's not their property, remember?
Whatever.
We know.
Park and Rec doesn't own any property in town.
That's true.
But they run that,
They don't own it.
I'm just saying, I said it's all Clinton, I said we live there. So, to be honest with you, I think it's all about dollars and cents. I've timed from DPW to every school, I've timed from every school to Joel. You know, nothing's more than a couple minutes, so, and if every job I had was in town, it would be fantastic. So if you know, I can't understand why that they technically need it on school property. Doesn't, I mean, other than it's a convenience, if it happened, it happened, but this is all really about dollars and cents since we took it out of the budget for the new school. So I truly think, and we'll see what happens, I think we're gonna probably discuss it on municipal building next, I think it's on the 19th is our meeting. We'll probably make a decision to send to the Board of Selectmen from there. But my professional opinion would be that go to DPW. You have a lot of stuff there that we could already utilize, that we didn't even put into the budget, and, you know, it would go down from there. It doesn't have to look as good. If you build a building on one of the school sites, it's gotta look like the school. You're not gonna just stick a Butler building up there or something that we could get relatively inexpensive that could be up in DPW where we took down the, you know, the old salt shed. There's a couple other different spots. Yes.
I think to that decision, the DPW spot, you can add safety and security there.
Yes, I mean, it is, I mean, there is safety there. I went down, you know, I sat in the parking lot of, you know, at the Joel at the different times where, you know, and it's packed all the time. It's packed in the summer, it's packed, you know, there's always kids there. There's the littlest kids in town basically are there. You know, I don't know why, but every kid seems to get picked up these days. It doesn't look like anybody uses a bus.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have these mothers that are, or could be fathers, on their phones or whatever, and their vans picking up these kids. It's just chaos there. And then all of a sudden at 4 o'clock, all the soccer kids or the football kids or the lacrosse kids, or it's not a great place for trucks going in and out. And I'm not saying that there's a ton of them, but I can't see it's safer than a spot in DPW where they're used to work vehicles, they're used to deliveries and tractor trailers getting delivered for different goods and stuff. So I don't think a safety in that thing that we were given showed that would be safer there. I don't know why it'd be safer there, but it truly wouldn't be. And being in our town is not that large. It's not, you know, I don't think the time, if these guys plan their day out correctly and take what they have to do and go to these different schools, even if it was at Joel, it's still only at Joel. You know, what about Elliott, what about Pearson, what about Morgan? You know, you still have to go to these other schools. So, as well as it be convenience, I think on the bottom line is we got to think about dollars and cents. We're spending a lot of money on a lot of different things right now, and I truly believe it'd be a lot more economical to do it up at DPW. There are stuff there that we could utilize, septic, we don't know, we're a little unsure of the septic down at Joel. The building might even be where it's proposed on a corner of the septic system, which,
John, did the school vehicles use the fuel farm at DPW?
yes.
Oh,
So, I mean, they do go up there, I don't think they fill up every day, but, you
No.
know, I don't know what their fuel, and there's only two vehicles, I believe, at this point. But, you know, I think, I'm with Willie, I think we need to get going forward here, you know,
And I hate to say it, we're not in the convenience industry. I did it years ago, if you remember with the fuel farms. We were gonna have one at the police station, we were gonna have one at the fire department, we were gonna have one at DPW, it was gonna cost us X amount, $200-something thousand. And I said, time out, guys, we got 6,000 in the ground at DPW with diesel, we can put a fuel vault for gasoline, we're a 17 square mile town. I don't care, and that's not that I don't care, but we're not in the convenience industry, we're only talking a minute or two this and that. It's really, it's dollars and cents, and I know you can say that it costs 50 cents for every 2 miles you gotta drive each way, this, and I tried that with me with the police department, when he keeps coming back to Capitol for his fuel vault. We gotta show in good faith to the taxpayers that we're actually trying to do the best that we can, and we did propose and promote that we were pulling this out of the project in order to save money, and, you know, that's the way I think we gotta approach it,
May I ask what the counter argument to this is?
Who's gonna,
convenience.
And convenience, so.
Because it's close to a school.
But how is that like materially like pan out?
that's not.
How's what material thing?
Well, so
The
the coun-
convenience of having them working out of DPW versus being within a couple of minutes from either of the schools. Ask the administrators of each of the schools.
I mean, I have all the times, it's within,
Now, John,
it's
I'm
within
gonna
a minute
disagree with you
difference.
times, because I did the same thing. I asked Mike, how many times do your guys make trips from Morgan, which is the facility that they're based out of
Yeah.
right now, to Joel every day? How many times to Elliott every day? How many times to Pearson for doing their normal maintenance that these 5 individuals have to do?
I think Mike really should be here too.
Mike,
It's
this
part of the
isn't the
committee.
thing,
This is
he
the
will be
committee.
there when we.
Yeah, but he's not here at the table now, Willie.
The
But it's-
committee's gonna vote on it.
But he has his vote in our
Next meeting.
committee. There's only 4 of us.
Yeah. I took that information, John, and I went to Google Maps.
Yep.
And I put in there, how many trips from this point to this point to this point, okay? It's a $12,000 difference a year, putting them at DPW versus putting them at the new Morgan or at the Joel facility. $12,000 a year, plus the vehicle costs that you're gonna have to add, because you don't factor in that.
I don't, you know, I'm not gonna tell anybody how to run their job, but seriously, then they gotta be able to plan their day from day one when they leave and not keep on going back. You should take what you need for the day and go to the job. That's it. Come back at the end of the day. There shouldn't be back and forth. And I'm not gonna say that anybody's running in incorrectly.
Provide a vehicle that
If my guys are going back and forth to my shop all day long, we got a problem.
What kind of vehicle do you provide for your guys? You got fleet side trucks?
No, we have 2 trucks. We have a van and a rack body like you guys have. We're not back and forth. We planned the day before what we're gonna have for that day.
So the only difference, John, for purposes of our discussion this evening, is that the nature of the jobs that come up in the 4 schools, some of it is absolutely planned. There are things that they can take with them, and this is what we're gonna do. And then there are those things that they're not anticipating, they get into something beyond either on the job that they're working on, or something else is coming up, and they get diverted to either another school or wherever. So it's not just as simple, here's the job for today, here's what we're gonna be doing, and here's what we can anticipate for materials and supplies.
Honestly, I'm shocked that this has been discussed for a year and we're still there.
Well, I
can't
would like to
believe
it.
hear how
I
you
can't believe it.
address the safety concerns.
This is gonna come through the
Yes.
committee,
Well,
Carol.
there
I
are-
know, but I mean, I understand, I've been there, I've kids at Joel, and I know the activity back there. How would you address that? in
So
terms of
from my vantage
in
point,
and out
the
traffic?
issue of the convenience and the issue of safety have been thrown on the table as smoke screens for the bottom line issue. Because there isn't a significant safety issue that has been identified. It is in the opinion of some individuals that it would be more safe at DPW than at Joel. That's professional, I'll give him that, but it's an opinion, it's not based on any factual data.
No, I was just.
Wait, I listened intently to your entire conversation. I think the other part of it has to do with the fact that in the end, the only thing, and Phil, I think will agree with me, that in the end, if we do a true cost analysis of both options, and it's exorbitantly more, then you're not gonna get a battle. But that hasn't been done yet. To the best of my knowledge, that a true side-by-side, apples to apples analysis of where everything is and what it's gonna cost to do the hookups and all of that, I would caution to say that that hasn't been done. And so we don't know if it's gonna be more expensive at Joel or more expensive at DPW. And again, there are various ideas that have been thrown out at DPW.
Morgan's not in the running anymore? It's not.
No, unfortunately not. And the other, I'll just throw out while I'm on a roll, the other piece is that had we left it in the original, which is past the wayside, but had we left it in the original Morgan project, and with the current space waiver that has been approved, it would have been incorporated into the existing project. It's hindsight, it's not anything we can do about it, but point of reference in terms of dollars and cents. It's not just about dollars and cents. It is about what makes the most sense, and a $25,000 or $30,000, even $50,000 difference from one site to the other would tell me putting it on one of our school sites is a more effective long-term benefit to the school system and to the town.
But isn't that obvious from your comment about throwing up a Butler building, which is 4 walls and a stainless steel roof, building something on a school site?
I just don't know
I
why
mean,
you
I can
guys are
see
so
huge cost
sticking in
savings.
your heels so deep.
The issue, I don't think that's what we're doing.
I
We're
think we're
asking
saying
for
there's
equal
no
conversation.
independent evaluation, because with all due respect, your evaluation isn't really.
They did have a cost analysis, and based
Why
on
would I don't have any skin in the game.
Yeah, you
that
do,
we're-
but that's skin in the game.
What is the
We all
skin in the
do
game?
too,
The skin in the game is that I want it
Let's
cheaper for the
just-
town.
Right, but that's your bias.
That's the truth.
What am I biased?
But-
You should all want
We should
that.
all
What-
want
Well, of course, and we do, we want
We
to
all
use
want
the
that.
best.
That's our
use of
idea,
it.
is-
But what Jack is saying is that there's not been.
I'm asking seriously,
Let me
Jack,
finish
what
my
is,
sentence.
why is?
The question is, and I just said it up front, if it really truly is less expensive to do it at DPW.
It is, there's no question about it.
There's not one piece of.
I did, Jack, I got the whole page, then you should come to the meeting that you were supposed to be at, when I presented the thing. How many pages is
The
it?
reality was that it wasn't apples to apples.
Did I do a whole line item thing of it?
By the end of the meeting,
And I did do it, we changed it line item from line item, and it came out to $50,000,
It was
Jack.
higher than that.
It was higher than that when it started. If you want me to do it again, if you wanna come and come next Saturday, 19th, I'll do it again for you. But why am I spending all this time? Nobody else. You guys haven't.
that's not true. That's
Yeah,
not true.
have you brought me anything? Anybody? That
Yes.
stupid thing you sent me that showed absolutely nothing. It was so biased towards going at the board, at Joel, it was ridiculous. And
What about
if
the
you,
independent study?
do you wanna see the independent study? It makes no sense, zero. That's why I was saying about the safety, because the safety, it was a joke. Because I
Actually
was,
said it's not as safe to come out of DPW because of
DPW.
the buses.
because of the buses. You have buses, you have the youngest kids in town right in front of you. That was the only reason I brought up the safety. I'm not saying it's that much safe, that's the reason to put it at DPW, but from your, whatever thing you gave me, it showed it was safer.
Sounds like the 19th would be an interesting meeting.
Yeah. But I'm saying, no one's given me, like, last time we came with the, all right, maybe at the end of the field hockey, I said, okay, we'll look into that. No one's got me a map. No one's tried to help me go find any of these existing maps for the Joel School. No one's tried to help me find the septic system. No one's tried to help me with any of it. I've had to do it all myself. And it's not like I don't have anything else to do. And I tried to do that, and it's not like we didn't do anything, Jack, because I did present something. Now, I said to Butch, and Butch did it, he did not get paid to do it, he doesn't even live in town, he was just doing it as a favor to me. And I said, Butch, and he didn't compare it when we started going line item to line item, and we changed it as we went. And it still came on 50,000, and that's at the very least. If you went just strict Butler building, use their septic system, use the power and stuff that they have there, it would be so much cheaper. And I know for a fact. I just don't understand why you guys, I understand, it would be convenient. If we had all the money in the world, there'd be a lot of things we'd do differently. You know?
Can I just ask one thing?
one of the things that I haven't heard, and I don't know if this is the time or if it eventually comes to us, is what, delve into a little bit of what they do, and not they have to do now, because I have to go to the grocery store. But, you know, what I haven't heard is what exactly they do, and whether or not that convenience actually does impact the safety from a different perspective of the kids, like how fast they can get there if all of a sudden water starts gushing from the ceiling. So is there anything that they do that is from a safety perspective of the kids in the building and the maintenance of the building, and is it quick, is it better, and if they get there quicker from an emergency? How much of it is an emergency? And I don't know if you have that
They're
data.
not firemen or anything, but they're still only at one school. No matter what, you don't have it at every school. So yes, it might be.
At every school, we have custodians,
Correct.
all right? They're there permanently,
Okay.
all right? These are people who do ancillary maintenance work. They're not,
Is there an objection for just being at the DPW site?
Well, one of the problems I have with it is the lady that works for Mike Cozy, half of her time is spent on doing the scheduling of the sports fields, the facilities, the 4 school buildings, or whatever activities that anybody from the public wants to use those facilities for. Half of her week is spent on doing that and making sure that that's all taken care of. And that is done a lot of the time face to face, where people are coming into her office to work with her because she's got the calendar, she keeps care.
Why does that make a difference where that office is?
Well, because what they were talking about, the DPW was putting a building up where the salt shed was, which is you gotta drive back through the gates and you gotta go back to this Butler building. It's not going to be someplace where a soccer mom was.
So what if they just threw a desk next to Donna's desk in DPW?
We proposed
Put a
that,
sign
but
up
we were
that
trying to
says-
compare apples with apples at this point. So that's why we didn't go with utilizing any of the existing
The
buildings,
building
which
with,
we
there's a
could.
building with
Well, I mean,
office
for
space is a
her,
comparison.
Right.
for the secretary position.
We could do that, I'm just saying, but the exercise was to
I get it.
compare apples with apples.
We just did not conclude that.
I mean,
So the 19th will be exciting. We look forward to the,
and there's 4 on the committee.
All right, thank you.
so we're on a
All
subcommittee.
right, so we can all go home now? Yes. All right, motion to adjourn,
Gatorade.
second, all in favor?
Fine.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I think it was very